What if mermaids aren't just the stuff of storybooks and sailor tales? What if they were real and still out there? For centuries, cultures all around the world have told eerily similar stories about mysterious, half-human creatures living in the sea. And while Hollywood wants us to think of them as friendly singers with fishtails, history tells a much darker and much weirder story. These aren't just myths. Some of these encounters were recorded by respected explorers, witnessed by entire communities, and even caused governments to get involved. In 2009, residents of a quiet coastal town in Israel called Kiryat Yam started reporting something completely bizarre: a mermaid seen lounging on rocks at sunset before diving into the sea. Dozens of witnesses claimed to see the same thing: a female figure with pale skin, a fishtail, and long dark hair. The sightings became so frequent and credible that the local government did something no one ever expected. They offered a $1 million reward for anyone who could prove the mermaid's existence. One man said he watched her do a backflip before vanishing. Another woman swore she saw her tail slap the water. News outlets across the world picked up the story, camera crews came, tourists showed up, and yet no one was able to capture solid proof. But the stories didn't stop, and here is the weirdest part: the reward still stands to this day unclaimed. When Christopher Columbus spotted land in the Caribbean, he wasn't just discovering new territory, he may have discovered a mermaid. In his 1493 ship log, Columbus described seeing 3 creatures rise from the water with the upper bodies of women and tails like fish. His exact words: "They are not as pretty as they are depicted, for somehow in the face they look like men." Most historians chalk this up to a manatee sighting, but that doesn't fully make sense. Columbus was an experienced navigator, he knows what manatees looked like, and why would he mention their faces at all if it was just a sea cow? What makes this more intriguing is that other sailors on his crew also reported similar sightings. These weren't isolated events, they were shared, consistent, and written down in one of the most famous explorer journals of all time. Could Columbus have stumbled onto something we've since lost? In the rough, stormy waters between the Scottish mainland and the Outer Hebrides lies a stretch known as the Minch, and sailors have feared it for generations. The reason? A strange and sinister race of sea beings called the Blue Men. These weren't graceful mermaids, these were blue-skinned, human-sized aquatic beings who were said to control storms and drown ships. Legend says they would swim up to a boat and shout poetry or riddles at the captain. If the captain failed to answer in rhyme, the Blue Men would overturn the vessel. While this sounds like classic mythology, here's a very strange thing. This exact story has been passed down for hundreds of years with very little variation. Sailors in that area regularly experience unexplainable equipment failure, freak waves, and vanishings. To this day, some Scottish fishermen won't sail through this area without leaving an offering in the water. Superstition or something they're too afraid to talk about? You decide. In 2012, construction crews working at 2 separate dam sites in Zimbabwe refused to return to work. The reason? They claimed that they were being harassed and even physically attacked by mermaids living in the water. This wasn't just a local rumor, it reached Zimbabwe's House of Assembly. High-ranking government officials confirmed the stoppage and admitted traditional healers were being brought in to appease the water spirits. The mermaids, known in the local Shona culture, are believed to live in deep pools and protect sacred water sources. Locals describe them as beautiful but dangerous beings who can bless or curse anyone who crosses them. Despite pressure, workers wouldn't return until ceremonies were held, and after the rituals, work resumed without further incident. That kind of mass fear, especially among adults working a government project, doesn't just come from total imagination. Something in those waters had to have scared them. In 1730, Hans Egede, a Danish-Norwegian missionary, wrote about something he saw while sailing near Greenland, a creature that defied explanation. He described it as having a human head and torso with a fish-like tail. According to Egede, the creature rose beside the boat, stared directly at the crew, then slowly sank into the sea. What makes this account so unsettling is who Hans Egede was. A serious, devout man whose writings were focused on converting Inuit populations, not really fantasy. He wasn't known for exaggeration or tall tales. In fact, many of his missionary accounts are painfully dry. So for him to suddenly document a mermaid, well, it's a bit odd. Historians today still include Egede's account in discussions of unexplained ocean phenomena. He even sketched the creature in later versions of his log. He either hallucinated or he saw something that he really couldn't explain. Japan's version of a mermaid is not the romantic beauty you'd expect. Known as the Ningyo, this creature is a mix of human and fish with a grotesque twist. Golden scales, sharp claws, and a monkey-like mouth filled with tiny human teeth. According to ancient legend, eating the flesh of these creatures grants eternal life, but catching one brings disaster. In the 1800s, fishermen supposedly caught one off the coast of Shikoku Island. The creature died shortly after, but was preserved and shown to a local official. And here's where things get even stranger. Reports say its remains were later hidden in a Buddhist temple to avoid bringing misfortune. In 2022, scientists analyzed a mummified mermaid stored in a shrine. Though DNA testing showed it was likely constructed from various animals, the preservation techniques suggest someone genuinely believed it was real. So why go to such lengths if it was all just a hoax?
In the summer of 2019, people hanging out on the beach in Worthing, England spotted something strange leaning against one of the wooden barriers that break up the shoreline. From a distance, it looked like a human skeleton, but the legs were fused together like a tail. Up close, you could see the ribcage and skull looked pretty real. A man named Ben Merchant was one of the first to spot the thing and snapped a photo of it. For a few hours, it had everyone staring and wondering if this thing had actually washed up from the sea. Well, once again, this was an art piece made by local sculptor Rosie Lee. She'd been given part of a skeleton and asked to turn it into something eye-catching, so she created the tail and posed the bones to mimic a mermaid. It didn't fool any scientists, but it still creeped a few people out. Holy crap, this thing is terrifying. I mean, I think I'd rather come across just about anything else washed up on the beach than this. Surprisingly, this freakish looking thing actually showed up on eBay. It isn't listed on there anymore. These photos were shared way back in 2006, but someone bid on this thing. There were so many stories floating around about these mysterious images at the time. Some stories went that the creature was found in Mexico, others said South Africa, the Philippines, the list goes on. But apparently someone came across this thing while exploring Fort de Soto Beach at the southern end of St. Petersburg, Florida. At least that's what the online auction said. Just keep it the hell away from me. In July of 2023, a woman named Bobby Lee Oates was driving along Keppel Sands in Queensland, Australia, looking for a place to camp when something weird caught her eye on the beach. It was this decayed, half-buried skeleton with a long, stretched-out tail and what looked like a human skull sitting right at the top. She snapped some photos and described it as exactly like a mermaid shape. The ribs were showing, the limbs were mostly gone, but the way the bones were laid out, it really did look like some creepy, washed-up sea creature. And when the images hit the internet, they went viral. Some thought it might have been a kangaroo leg stretched out and mangled by the ocean. Others said it looked like a badly decomposed dolphin or seal. Marine experts eventually stepped in and said, yeah, it was probably just one of those, just a gross beached carcass, but till this day, we still don't know exactly what this thing was. So technically, we can't rule out mermaids altogether. In 2006, locals in a small town in Malaysia came across this tiny, dried-up mermaid mummy about a foot long. It had a shriveled face, little arms, and a tail. In 2014, another one appeared, this time in Papua New Guinea. Almost identical, leathery skin, tiny claws, and that unmistakable mermaid tail. Once again, these were your classic carnival props. The mummies were made by stitching a smaller mammal or monkey's torso onto a fishtail, then drying the whole thing out to look old and mummy-like. These fake mermaids were all over Southeast Asia in the 19th and early 20th centuries, sold to curious tourists and local curiosities collectors. No DNA tests or CT scans have been done on these particular ones, but based on what we know, they're pretty much exactly the same kind of monkey-fish hybrids that P.T. Barnum used in his sideshows. This video was filmed right after a hurricane. We watch as the person holding the camera walks along a beach covered in fallen trees and debris. Then they spot something strange washed up on the sand. At first glance, looks like a big dead fish, but as the camera gets closer, you notice there's hair on it. The person filming keeps moving in and we get a better look. This looks to be a gnarly, mummified mermaid. And not the beautiful, magical version we like to imagine. To be fair, none of the entries on this list really have been. At best, they've been skeleton bones, and at the worst, they've been freakish looking monsters. Now, sure, we've already established that something like this could be faked, and you probably shouldn't need me to tell you that, but if this is a hoax, it's pretty well done. One of the top comments on the video from user Cajun2197 says, "I have seen real mummies. This looks frighteningly real. The skin pulled back around the mouth as it dried, bulging eyes, taut cheekbones, the ribs and pelvis under dark, dried flesh. The fins brittle, exactly like a dead fish drying in the sun." In a temple in Okayama, Japan, there's this tiny 12-inch mermaid that people thought had been caught in a fishing net sometime between 1736 and 1741. It's kept in a box, sometimes displayed in a glass case. The legend goes that eating the flesh could make you live forever. But scientists from Kurashiki University CT scanned it and found almost no real bones inside. The torso is mostly cloth, paper, cotton, even sand and charcoal held together by metal pins. On the surface, they did find fish skin and mammal hair, pufferfish parts on the arms, and the jaw and teeth from a predatory fish, plus claws that looked like they came from a lizard. The CT scans showed clear wooden stakes running through it to keep the shape intact, but it's still pretty cool because it is an old artifact. Radiocarbon dating says it probably dates to the late 1800s. Back in 1842, a man named P.T. Barnum, now remembered as the king of circus hoaxes, showed off something he was calling the Fiji mermaid at his American Museum in New York. Barnum described it himself as an ugly, dried-up, black-looking diminutive specimen, giving it the appearance of having died in great agony. Well, sign me up. People just lined up like crazy to see this thing, a shriveled little corpse with a fish tail and a bony humanoid torso. For a while, people thought they were staring at the remains of a real mermaid. But it turns out this was stitched together by Japanese fishermen, basically the upper half of a monkey sewn to the lower half of a fish. But here's what's pretty interesting. Even after Barnum admitted it was fake, people kept showing up. It worked because they just wanted to believe. I mean, plus, that just sounds like a wild thing to see in person. Versions of the Fiji mermaid still pop up today in Ripley's museums and roadside sideshows, sometimes made from turtles, sometimes stuffed with paper and glue, but that creepy, janky look is always the same. P.T. Barnum's mermaid took a very old Japanese tradition and brought it to the West, kicking off a whole wave, see what I did there, of mermaid obsession over here. This tiny stitched up thing ended up shaping what a lot of us picture when we hear the words mermaid skeleton. In 2012, this odd looking thing was displayed at the Danish National Museum. It looked like the skeleton of a mermaid. Human bones up top, a long tail instead of legs. There was also a plaque by the display with a very official scientific sounding name, Hydronymphus pesky, like this was some long-lost species that had finally been discovered, and for a while people actually thought it might be legit. The whole thing was actually built by an artist named Millet Rude. It's not entirely fake though. She did use real human bones for the top half. It gives it some authenticity for sure. The tail she made herself though, and she did a damn good job because it looks pretty convincing to me. And then it ended up touring around galleries and zoos, and people kept taking pictures and calling this proof of mermaids. Even now, images of the display are still shared around online, and without context, some swear it's real. It's not, it's just a really good art piece that fooled a lot of people. This isn't the only time Denmark's had a weird encounter with mermaid bones, though. Speaking of mermaid skeletons showing up in odd places, take a look at this. A lot of Copenhagen locals were pretty surprised to see a skeleton with a fishtail while strolling along the waterfront, especially because they're used to seeing this. So one of the most famous tourist spots in Copenhagen is the Little Mermaid statue. It's a small bronze sculpture, only about 4 feet tall, made by Erik Erikson, and based on Hans Christian Andersen's famous fairy tale, The Little Mermaid. The statue's been sitting on a rock by the harbor since 1913, and millions of people have visited, taken photos with it, and called it a national treasure. But in 2010, something unusual happened. The statue was temporarily moved to Shanghai to be part of the Danish pavilion at the World Expo. It stayed there for months from March to November, which left her rock back in Copenhagen completely empty. That's when someone came up with a funny idea. On April 1st, 2010, a mermaid skeleton suddenly appeared near the statue's usual spot. It was sitting in the same pose as the original statue, and for 2 hours people gathered and took photos, entertained but confused and maybe even a little creeped out. I mean, did some wacko attach a fishtail to a human skeleton and put it out on display as some sick joke? Well, kinda. These were actually human bones from the hips up attached to the tail of a swordfish. It was made a few years earlier as part of a museum exhibit about mythical creatures. The prank was put together by Hans Strager, who was the head of exhibitions at the time. Got tons of attention and became one of the most talked about mermaid sightings in Denmark. Around 2011, photos started popping up online of what looked like a pale, half-decayed mermaid corpse lying on the banks of the Vltava River in Bulgaria. People went wild over this. Headlines screaming "mermaid found" were all over social media, and it makes sense. I mean, if you randomly came across these images at a time before AI could just render stuff like this in 20 seconds, you'd probably do a double take. The thing looked freaky, scaly skin, webbed fingers, and that ghostly pale look with a human-ish shape. Not only that, but it just looked a little too real. But this was actually a super detailed movie prop. The figure was eventually traced back to a man named Joel Harlow, the special effects artist behind Pirates of the Caribbean. It turns out he'd made this mermaid corpse for the films. Somehow, it ended up in the river though. Whether as a prank or entirely by accident, no one's really sure.
In 1978, a geologist hiking near Iceland stumbled across a strange fossil embedded in a rock wall. It looked like a partial skeleton, with a humanoid rib cage, scaled lower limbs, and elongated finger bones. He turned it over to the University of Iceland for study, and then it vanished. To this day, only photographs remain. Some experts suggested it was a hoax or misidentified fish bones, but the proportions didn't match any known marine species. What's stranger is that mermaid sightings are extremely common in Icelandic folklore, especially in that region. Locals believe that fossil was proof of an evil sea witch believed to lure sailors into whirlpools and drown them. During the Cold War, Soviet submarines patrolling near the Sea of Japan recorded something bizarre on their sonar. What sounded like high-pitched singing, followed by multiple fast-moving underwater objects surrounding their vessel. At first, the crew believed it was a foreign sub, but no signatures matched known technology. One sonar technician described the singing as, quote, almost human, but not quite. Years later, after the fall of the USSR, some of these logs were leaked to independent researchers. Many now believe the Soviets may have encountered the same mysterious beings that Pacific Island cultures describe as sea sisters, a group of female spirits or creatures who travel in pods, warning or punishing those who disturb the ocean. Off the island of Vis, off the Croatian coast, sailors have long spoken of sea girls who appear in the moonlight singing to fishermen. And in 2016, something strange happened. A group of night fishermen swore they saw 3 long-haired women sitting on coastal rocks. They were naked, appeared to shimmer in the moonlight, and vanished into the sea when approached. Initially laughed off by the public, the story gained traction when cell phone footage surfaced, brief and grainy, but showing 3 glowing shapes diving in unison. Marine biologists later confirmed the video showed, quote, no known animal behavior, and that area is now unofficially off limits to small boats at night. This one isn't a legend, it's actually a scientific theory with some strange implications. The aquatic ape hypothesis suggests that a branch of human evolution may have adapted to life in the water, developing traits like like subcutaneous fat, breath control, and even partial webbing between fingers and toes. Mainstream science largely rejects it, but here's the strange part. People in remote coastal areas from Indonesia to Mozambique describe sightings of humanoid creatures with those exact features. Webbed hands, smooth hairless bodies, exceptional swimming speed. Could these be descendants of a lost evolutionary branch? Some anthropologists aren't laughing anymore, especially after scuba divers found handprints in underwater caves far deeper than any known human could reach without modern gear. In 1830s Louisiana, newspapers ran with a bizarre story. A fishwoman had been spotted multiple times along the banks of the Mississippi River near Baton Rouge. Witnesses described a creature with long black hair, pale skin, and fish-like lower limbs. The sightings caused panic. People refused to bathe or fish in the river, and boat captains rerouted cargo trips. What's wild is that these stories didn't go away. In 1842, a letter to the editor in the New Orleans Bee referenced an aquatic woman with haunting eyes spotted again, and even blamed her for a sunken steamboat. While no physical evidence ever surfaced, the consistency and fear surrounding these sightings make them stand out among American mermaid lore. In 2021, a team of researchers studying glacial melt near Greenland dropped a deep-sea camera into a subglacial cave. What they captured shocked them. A figure, upright, bipedal, but unmistakably aquatic. This creature hovered in the background for several seconds before darting away. The footage was dismissed by officials as, quote, distorted data, but the researchers who collected it told a different story in private. According to them, they reviewed the raw footage frame by frame and watched as the figure turned its head toward the camera, revealing wide-set eyes and thin gill slits. They called them shadow divers, beings that exist on the edge of where life should be possible. And if you ask them off the record, they'll say that we are not alone down there. In 2005, a team of commercial divers working off the coast of Baranof Island in Alaska reportedly encountered something terrifying while performing maintenance on deep-sea pipeline. According to a declassified safety report from the contractor, 2 divers surfaced early, shaken and refusing to go back down. One claimed he saw a, quote, human face with gills staring at him from a crevice in a rock. They described the creature as having webbed hands, reflective eyes, and scales that shimmered in their flashlight beams. Locals weren't surprised. In fact, some Inuit legends speak of sea people who dwell near that exact region. They even have a name, the Kalupalik, mermaid-like beings that lure people underwater with a hum you can only hear when submerged. High up on the windswept cliffs of the Faroe Islands, a remote chain in the North Atlantic, there is a cave that few people dare enter. Inside are carvings, ancient ones, etched into the rock. They clearly depict human-fish hybrids drawn with long hair, webbed hands, and tails. According to local historians, these markings predate Christian influence in the area and may have been created by Norse explorers. But here's the twist. One panel shows what appears to be a mermaid holding a dead man's head. Creepy? Absolutely. But archaeologists can't deny the authenticity, and some believe the site was a ritual space used to ask protection from sea spirits during voyages. These weren't just artistic depictions, they were warnings. In 2013, an offshore oil rig operating in the Gulf of Mexico experienced a strange sonar reading. Something large, fast, and warm-blooded was circling the base of the platform. Assuming it was a shark, divers went to inspect the structure, but returned reporting, quote, something strange watching us from the shadows. One diver swore he saw a pale-skinned human-like figure swimming against the current with almost no effort. He said it had no breathing apparatus, yet it was moving at least 60 feet down. Internal emails from the rig, later leaked online, referred to it as, quote, the Mermaid Incident. No formal statement was ever released, and the crew involved were reassigned shortly after. Most people think of the Fiji mermaid as a 19th century hoax, an ugly little thing that turned out to be a monkey sewn to a fish. But here's what most people don't know. There were dozens of reports of similar creatures in the South Pacific long before it became a circus attraction. Fishermen from the islands have passed down stories for generations of a creature with glowing eyes and silver fins that comes to surface during storms. Some researchers believe the quote original Fiji mermaid shown by P.T. Barnum may have been a poorly preserved copy of something real because other specimens that looked nearly identical were reportedly destroyed by British colonists trying to quote clean up native beliefs. In Serbia's Lake Varana, locals whisper about the Mermaid of Black Lake, a pale humanoid figure with long black hair that emerges on foggy mornings. In the early 2000s, a group of hikers claimed to have seen the creature from a distance, describing it as female in shape but with unblinking white eyes and scales across its arms. When they tried to approach, it vanished into the water with a splash. What's eerie is that locals had told nearly identical stories for decades, even before modern media could influence the narrative. In 2013, an Icelandic diving team exploring an underwater cave near Greenland captured something odd on camera. The footage, which was briefly circulated online before being lost, showed a humanoid figure with fins darting behind a rock. The diver filming could be heard screaming underwater before the camera cut out. Though skeptics cried hoax, the divers themselves, experienced professionals, stood by what they saw. Some believe the footage was confiscated due to its implications, and it doesn't help that government bodies reportedly shut down that cave to public access not long after. In the 1940s, fishermen off the coast of Benin, West Africa, claimed to have found what looked like a mermaid corpse tangled in their net. The body, which reportedly had webbed hands, fish-like skin, and a mostly human skull, was taken to local authorities. But within days, it was removed by officials and allegedly flown to France for study. Nothing was ever released to the public, and what makes this case so strange is how many unrelated locals swore they saw it and how quickly it was covered up. Some claim it was part of the Mamiwata legend, a powerful mermaid spirit worshipped across West Africa. In 1967, a ferry captain off the coast of British Columbia saw something on the rocks that stunned him. He wasn't alone. Passengers on board reported seeing a blonde-haired mermaid lounging on the rocks near Main Island. Photos were taken and one even made it to a local newspaper. Some said it was a prank, but others insisted that it was real. In fact, the town embraced the story so much they started selling mermaid souvenirs. The strange thing, no one ever came forward to claim it as a hoax. No models, no performers, no confessions, just a mystery that remains unsolved to this day.